Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Live Ultralight podcast powered by Outdoor Vitals. Today, we are going to be talking through a trip that I did. It was a little over a month ago. I've been so busy that I haven't been able to record this, but it was a personal trip that I took where I took my little boy out on a backpacking trip. That's something I like to do with him at least once a year. And so this was like our dedicated trip. And we went and staged out of my parents' home, and while we were there, I decided kind of last minute to invite my dad to come along with us. And so with that, we went out on a trip where we're doing some fishing and just trying to make the trip all about my little boy Atlas and him having a great time out there. And so today in this podcast, I wanted to go over that and basically walk you through that trip, how it turned out, some of the fun that we had, some of the lessons that were learned. And at the end of this, I do want to share a pretty big takeaway that I had that really, really stood out to me on this trip. So the trip, so the trip started, and I apologize. This is I don't know. We need like a title for this. Talks with Tayson or something like that. But I do appreciate you guys joining me. I'm gonna pop this open here and just kind of sit back and hopefully tell a story, have a good time. And like I say, hopefully we'll, at the end of this, I'll kind of wrap it into some of my big takeaways and thoughts of the trip. But I'm not sure which will come first, but I just did a podcast interviewing a gentleman by the name of Brandon, and he had a lot of tips. We talked, the entire podcast was just about taking kids outdoors and getting them backpacking. And a couple of years back now, so I think this is the third year in a row that I've taken Atlas on a backpacking trip with me. I've been inspired by Brandon to try to do this a lot more throughout the year and figure out how to do that better. But these trips have been super fun and well worth it. Atlas looks forward to them so much, and I think it's just honestly because they become so special because we make them specifically about him. So typically I'll plan these so that they go to a lake. Lakes and creeks and stuff like that are things that kids can have an infinite amount of fun with, whether it's from fishing, throwing rocks, throwing sticks, or just anything of that. There's kind of a destination to get to and something that they really enjoy. And I typically like to find ones that are off the beaten path a little bit. And that's been a good recipe, I guess you could say. Last year I took him into this area it was only a mile in, but it was about 1,000 feet of elevation climb. So it was like straight up for 1 mile. And he did an awesome job. I really focus on on making it good for him. And so the way that I did that with the hike was basically he carried nothing except for a trekking pole. He had a single trekking pole and a backpack that was full of a snack that he chose, which was a backpack full of high chews. So, he'd hike as far as he could. He'd stop. He'd get out a high chew. He'd eat. And then he'd walk a little more. And, just a lot of patience, I think, is required to do this. But he did an awesome job, had a lot of fun. It was a really good time. So this year, really wanted to go and do the same thing. So I plotted out this new area that I'd never been to before, had kind of heard from someone that there's some really good fishing up in this area, and wanted to see if we could push Atlas a little bit more. So the trail itself was 2 miles and about 900 feet of elevation over the course of those 2 miles. So a lot less aggressive, a little bit less climbing than the year before. So I thought we could do a pretty decent job with this and do well. And as we went over to Grandma's house and we're going, kind of decided last minute, I've got almost all the gear and to take my dad with me. And, he's honestly never really backpacked. I guess I didn't realize this. I think I asked him on that trip, how many times he'd been backpacking. And the first time was the time that he came with me, and then this time. So this is literally his second backpacking trip of all time. My little 5-year-old's been on more backpacking trips than my dad had. So thought it was a good opportunity to take him out. And that's one of the goals I've kind of had lately with him too, is to get him out there, get him a little bit more comfortable with the idea of backpacking and just kind of open up that world to him. So really two birds with one stone, I guess you could say, and bringing them both out there and hopefully making a good go of this. So So yeah, we dial in some of the gear that my dad will need. He packs it, but really same scenario applied for my dad as my boy, which was try to get as much weight off of him as he can. Wouldn't say he's someone who is super active as far as hiking and some of that goes. And so, this hike wouldn't be hard. It wouldn't be easy for him, I guess I should say. I don't think it was going to be hard for him, but the lighter I can make it, the more enjoyable it's going to be for him, and so the goal was to just try to put as much stuff as I could in my pack and go. And so we drive out there, we get to the trailhead, and my pack at that point was probably just under 30 pounds between water, food, and basically everyone's gear. And so in my pack, I had, my dad's sleeping pad, I had a 2-person tent, I had an extra top quilt. A lot of these were actually things I was going to bring anyways for Atlas. So I already had those in there. I had Atlas's extra clothes. I think I had 3 fishing poles because I thought I would do some fly fishing as well as bring Atlas's fishing pole and a fishing pole for my dad. Might have just been 2. I can't remember on that one though. I had a hammock because I thought Atlas might enjoy hanging out in the hammock. I had a chair because it was going to be a little bit more relaxed of a trip. Had a lot of extra food and then the water. So compared to what I typically might be at the start of a trip, let's say loaded on the hoof, 17 to 20 pound, backpack weight. I was really up close to 30 pounds. But anyways, we got in here and started hiking, and this trail was really unique because there was like no one who hikes in here. It's just like this trail that's not really a trail at times to get in there. It goes up to this kind of secret lake that's just tucked up behind a little bit of private property down below in the valley. And so I love to talk to Atlas and kind of make it this experience of like we're going to this secret lake. It's a kind of an exclusive feeling. I think he really loves that. In fact, the year before we went to a different secret lake, and I think he just really enjoys trying to make it special like that. So started hiking, and honestly, Atlas did not make it far at all before he started, are we there yet? And just kind of struggling. So started having a lot of stops earlier on, and that was, a good exercise in patience. So all you dads out there, or parents, be a better way to say that are taking your kids out, getting them out there, I think just go into it with no expectations of time. Go into it with a very level head and knowing that you will have some patience required. As for me, it was like I was judging so much of it based off the year previous and thinking, oh, he did this effort. Now he's another year older, and kids grow fast and get strong a lot, in these younger ages. And so it was like, well, he should be able to do this. This will be, elevation wise, it's even less than last year, even though it's 2 miles. But the fact of the matter is, kids are either in it or they're out of it sometimes. And so he was kind of struggling a bit, I think, to stay focused on it. And we were not very far in, probably a quarter of a mile before I started trading off between him hiking and me putting him on my shoulders. So this was a great test for the shadow light because I was basically carrying between 30 and 70 pounds because my boy's about 40 or a little over 40 pounds. And I was trying to set him up on the frame so that it could kind of shift the weight down to my hips. So that was a good test for the shadow light. But it was good. Hiking was pretty good. It was really pretty. Just going through these meadows that were basically untouched because this just isn't really a destination that people go to. A lot of elk sign in there, really pretty. And yeah, just a pretty pleasant hike in. Stopped a handful of times for snacks and breaks and just looking at some of the terrain. And so it was really pretty. But as we got higher up, it was cool because we started to walk kind of along this draw, I guess you'd say, that you could tell was going to go up to the lake. But it was cool because it came up and it looked like it was just going to be kind of this background of cliffs behind it and then the lake. So we hiked up through there. It's really pretty. Get to the lake, and it's just a cool setting. Took us a little bit to kind of navigate around the lake and find a spot to camp, but eventually found a spot to camp, and that chapter, I guess, of getting in there was done. And when we first got there, there was just all sorts of these little boils, looked like fish, boils on the top of the water. And I was like, man, the fishing is going to be great. This is going to be a really good time. And so set up camp. I had a 2-person Fortius set up, and then blew up the pads, set up the hammock. So Atlas and my dad kind of hung out in the hammock and had a good time using the. It's been a minute since I've been really into hammocks, and but we had a ridgeline. That's what I'm thinking. I had a ridgeline in there. They were launching sticks off of the ridgeline as high as they could, and as they were laying in it, and just having a really good time. And so I got camp set up, and decided, hey, let's go try to do some fishing. And I get down there and I start casting, and I'm casting, and there's no bites, and I'm looking and I'm watching. I'm thinking something's a little off here. Like, I haven't seen a fish jump. I've just seen like these bubbles on the top of the water, boils on the top of the water. And so I kept fishing, and I was watching, and I'm like, man, this is so weird. And then I'm out on this log, so I kind of walk up out on this log, and I'm fishing, and I look down, and I can see a fish right below me. And I'm looking at it. It's kind of floating along. And all of a sudden I look, I'm like, is that a leg on this fish? And then it swims, and it starts swimming around, and it's not a fish. It's a salamander. And so I'm watching, and all of a sudden I see another salamander. And then I see the salamander come up to the top and basically boil on the top to grab a bug off the top and then go back down. And I realized that this lake has hundreds, I don't know, maybe thousands, hundreds of salamanders, big ones, like 6, 7 inch, 8 inch long salamanders are just littering this lake. And then I'm looking again, I'm like, well, I haven't seen a single fish boil, and all I'm seeing is salamander boils apparently. And anyways, I could be a lot more of a fisherman, but also wanting to spend time with Atlas. It was kind of like, well, let me get the fish going, and then I'll help him catch fish. And after I realized that, I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know if fishing's going to be the thing at this lake right now, because it required maybe a little bit more patience and work. And again, not seeing a single fish boil was a little disheartening. And so kind of came back off of that and thought, well, what am I going to do here? And as he loves fishing, he really enjoys fishing. So we took a little hike over to another lake that was, a couple hundred yards away, and looked at that, and same thing, tons of boils, no fish jumping. Come back, and I was just trying to think of what to do. We could throw rocks into the lake, and then we just had the idea, let's start a fire. And man, sometimes you have those moments where you just feel like you forget the joys of certain things in life. What I mean by that is so I have a camp trailer that we'll pull around sometimes to camp with friends and family, and make it a little bit easier, especially when we got little kids. And with that, I've got a propane fire pit that I'll often take if we're going to have a fire. And then when I'm out backpacking, just due to sometimes time on trail, or not wanting to get sparks on expensive gear, or I don't know, fill in the blank, I don't have a lot of fires on trail anymore. So I just don't do fires very often. And so we got this fire going, and Atlas just came to life. He was having the best. I've just never seen a kid just more excited to find stick after stick after stick after stick after stick to keep this fire going. I mean, he had that fire roaring so high and so hot the whole time, and was just having an absolute blast. Such a good time. And it was just so fun to sit there and watch him, interact with me, interact with Grandpa, light this fire. And it was just one of those moments where, like, man, as a kid, I loved fire. I loved starting fires and just anything to do with fire. And so a lot of fun, I think, just to watch him and just kind of reminisce on me being a little kid as well. But we did that for a long time. It started to get dark. I decided to cook up some dinner. So made last time we went, had a biscuits and gravy from Peak Refuel. and he is obsessed with that. So made us a peak refuel, biscuits and gravy. He ate a ton of it and just sat there by the fire, had a great time. And at one point, I looked behind me, and just before I was getting all the way dark, I saw something swimming across the top of the water. And I jumped up and turned around. Sure enough, this big, huge water snake was coming directly at the fire. Like he was attracted to the light of the fire. And so I stand up and kind of yell and throw a stick or something and scare it off. And he kind of swims away. And I thought in the back of my mind, feel like he was coming for that fire for a reason. And I wonder if he'll be back. But sat down, finished the meal, hung out for a while. I stood up to, I think, hand my dad something. And man, right behind him, this massive, massive water snake is right behind him with this big fat lump in his body. You could see clearly just eaten like a 6 to 8 inch salamander that was like halfway down his body. And I've never seen a water snake so dang massive. But yeah, it was a good start. A little bit of a fright, I guess you could say. I don't love snakes, but I had dang near stepped on the thing because he was coming right into our fire pit again, which was just kind of comical. But anyways, had a good, enjoyable evening, had some snacks, cooked up some hot chocolate, sit next to the fire, and then, called it a night. Went up to camp, which was just 30 yards up the hill, and we all three fit into the 40th two-person tent. So we had 2 of our long, wide pads, and Atlas and me just kind of shared one, but really he was just kind of in the middle of our 2 pads, and we both had top quilts, so we could just kind of pull corners over it, to make sure that he was covered. And I always like to bring big fleece, like onesie style pajamas for my kids, just to help make sure that if they do get a little bit of exposure or something out of the covers or not in the sleeping bag, that they have, something on that'll keep them sleeping through the night well. And so, slept really well. Brought my 2 dogs, and they chased something out of camp in the middle of the night. But other than that, was just a very enjoyable evening. Got some pretty decent sleep, even with the kid, kind of crawling up and cuddling up against you all night on a sleeping pad in a small tent. But was very adequate. And honestly, I think the biggest con was just that it was pretty dang hot. It felt pretty dang warm out there. So, a lot of times you go up into the higher elevation, 9 or 10,000 feet, and hoping for some relief from the heat. And but it was good. It was a good, enjoyable night. Woke up the next day, and literally the first thing Alice wanted to do was go start that fire again. So he went and started the fire with Grandpa, and they tended it while I took down camp. And I think I recorded a little bit of what gear I had, and we may put out a little video on this as well. But basically took down camp, packed up all of our bags, and then, had breakfast with them, and I think I had breakfast, then took down camp. But, and then it was basically hiking out. These are just kind of quicker overnighter experiences, not multi-day or anything like that. But, I guess one of the funnier parts is on the hike out, I did expect him to do a little better. It's downhill, less exertion. We got about halfway down, and he started to ask for food, and I said, "Yeah, I can make food." And I kind of knew that he was going to want the biscuits and gravy, so I just mentioned to him. I said, "I don't have any more of the biscuits and gravy." And man, he was not happy about that. But we walked a little bit further, and he said, "Yeah, I'll try it. Why don't you still cook it up, and I'll try it?" So I cooked up, I think it was a chicken pesto from Peak Refuel, and gave him a bite, and man, he just devoured that one as well. So Peak Refuel, kid approved, definitely love them. Anyways, had a good hike out, got out of there, and it was overall just a really good trip. But what I guess, so my takeaways from this are twofold, I guess. I had an incredible time taking both my dad and my boy out backpacking. I think that people get nervous about taking kids backpacking, that it's going to be hard or all these things. And to me, it's just a factor of changing your expectations, changing your plans, and making some gear changes that'll work. But I think the bigger thing that was on my mind was, this is incredible that we can take 3 people out, and by using, ultralight focused gear, that I personally could carry all 3 people's gear comfortably and make it a very enjoyable experience for them. So again, think about it. I was carrying as much as I possibly could for my dad. The only things that he was carrying was food and clothing. And I also helped him, maybe flashlight was another thing and stuff, like a phone. But, I helped him kind of make sure he wasn't overpacking any clothing. And so he was pretty streamlined there. So really his pack was probably just a, sub 5 pounds of gear and clothes. And then the pack and anything else he might have snuck in when I wasn't looking. But so I had as much as I could, everything else. I had the cook system. I had a sleeping pad. I had his top quilt. I had, a 2-person tent. I had all the fishing poles. I had the hammock. I had the chair. I even think I had the dog food. I think that was in my pack as well. And so it was a really cool feeling to think, man, I can take 3 people backpacking in 1 backpack worth of gear and make it super, super enjoyable for them. And it was one of those like side benefits, I guess you could say, of packing ultralight. People love to pose that question of, well, why do people want, why do you need ultralight gear? I want to be comfortable. I want to have luxury items. I want to have, fill in the blank. And I believe in those, but my philosophy, and I think I've said this quite a few times, is, get your base weight down to about 10 pounds and then add in the few things that might be luxury items for you. Maybe it's a seat. Maybe it's the, bring in a Helinox seat or something like that. That's great. Get your base weight down to 10 pounds, add in the 1 pound Helinox seat. Or let's say you go ultra luxury and you bring the 2 pound Helinox seat or something along those lines. But once you have the ability to go super, super lightweight, it gives you so many more options to do things, whether that's to go farther mileage-wise, whether that's to bring additional people, carry other people's gear when needed, bring kids on the trail. Just thinking about me, man, if I was to go backpacking as a kid with the gear that I had available, there'd be no possible way my dad could have carried our gear because 1 sleeping bag would have filled up a whole backpack. So how is he going to carry 2 plus other gear, metal, stainless steel mess kits and big Coleman cook pots and, all sorts of things like that. And so I guess just in the grand scheme of things, it was just really cool to realize an extra side benefit of having ultralight gear. It really didn't feel like that much extra. Throw in another top quilt, throw in an extra pad, throw in these other things to jump from. I mean, you look at it, top quilt, 1.5 pounds. Pad, long, wide, big pad, another 1.5 pounds. To go from a 1-person 40th to a 2-person 40th, a little over half of a pound, which that one's kind of crazy. I probably brought extra clothes for Atlas. I brought him pajamas. I brought him, extra changes of socks and underwear and big puffy jackets so that he wouldn't be cold. And so that was maybe 2 pounds worth of gear. I really didn't skimp there, I guess you could say. Fishing poles, I had probably 1.5 pounds worth of fishing poles and tackle, a pound for a hammock, 1 pound for a chair, so I'm sitting at about 9 extra pounds to add, enough gear for me, my boy, and my dad to go backpacking. So overall, I guess it was just really cool. It was really cool to see what ultralight gear can do for you. It was really cool to see kind of a different application of like another reason why having lighter weight, more packable, performance-focused gear is important. And it was a really cool experience. So if you're someone who's thought about taking your family out, bringing kids out on the trail, it's an incredibly rewarding experience. I would highly, highly encourage you to take new backpackers out on the trail and kids out on the trail. In fact, we just completed the 100-mile challenge. And next year, we really want to bring it back with a lot more bang and open up what it means. So we're going to be changing up the tiers so that they can also be focused around new backpackers or kids that are getting into backpacking and make it a better experience there. We also want to make it more interactional. So we're going to change up our live streams to not be like a live stream, but actually be an interaction, more like a Zoom call with members. So there's a lot of things we're going to change, but there's not much more rewarding in my mind than to bring people out to experience nature and to have a different experience with nature. It was a trip that I'll remember for the rest of my life. And it was an amazing bonding time for me and Atlas, as well as Grandpa and Atlas. They had probably the best time, because as I'm doing all my camp chores, they're over there just playing with the fire and swinging in the hammock and having a great time. So they did have a really fun time doing that. But don't be afraid, I think, to take people out, new people, as well as little kids or family members. There's additional benefits to getting performance-focused and ultralight gear that pay dividends when you are taking some people out, or maybe need to share the load a little bit. But overall, just wanted to share that with you. I hope that brings a little bit of value. Hopefully the story was worth hearing. It was definitely fun to go out there and do. We've got more content coming around kids and bringing new people out on the trail. If you are a new backpacker, I would love to hear from you, because it will help us. I think a lot of times, because we're more like in the, I don't want to say expert, but like seasoned backpacker realm, a lot of times the content that we're interested in is that, versus talking to more of the beginner backpackers. So here's my pitch to you. If you're a beginner backpacker, go leave us a review that says, what you think of the podcast. Hopefully it's nice 5-star review, but you can review it how you want, and give us a little bit of feedback. Say, I'd love to hear about beginning backpacking. I'd love to hear more stories, whatever it is. I'd love to hear the comments from you guys, and it really could sway some of the content that we build. But if you're a new backpacker, please don't hesitate to get out there, push your limits, push past those limits, and experience the great outdoors. Now, let me just double check on my notes here from Joe, our podcast producer, that we don't have anything else to cover. But if you have any questions for us directly, you can reach out to liveultralightpodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's liveultralightpodcast@gmail.com. Make sure to send over your reviews, and really appreciate you guys joining me today. Get out there, take new people into the backcountry, and have a good time. Keep living ultralight, and we'll see you guys out on the trail.